everybody, welcome to this video with Literacy Teachers, where we're all about helping you to inspire, motivate, and change how your students are read and write for academic success. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about how video games can help struggling readers. Now, in a previous video, I talked to you about how video games can help any student really be beneficial for them in terms of improving their reading abilities. And today what I want to do is take a closer look at how they can help struggling readers specifically. So this stems out of my work with Delight Games that I talked about in the prior video. And Delight Games really, it looks like a book, really. I mean, you download it as an app, but it looks like a choose your own adventure book. It's very text heavy. And so when I was doing a project with them to really understand what made people like the app and choose it and engage with it, etc., my assumption was, specifically because it was so text-based, my assumption was that these were all going to be people who enjoyed reading, right? They like to read. They probably had a reading practice. They probably read lots of books, right? Most of them. That was my assumption. So I was really surprised when a subset emerged of adolescents who said they hate reading and who identified as being poor readers. I couldn't figure out why those kids were actively choosing to read this app and said they loved it. So I sat down with them, talked to them about their experiences, and I'm going to share with you some things that I learned about why they enjoyed this app so much and what it can mean for your instruction. So the first thing that these kids really, really liked about this app was that they got to read without labels, okay? So what they said was that when they read Delight Games, no one placed any labels on them. No one told them they were a bad reader. No one told them, oh, you can't read this, it's too hard, or that they had to do something different about how they were reading. When they were reading on this app, they simply got to read and have fun, okay? No one said you're doing it wrong. No one said you need to do it differently. And over time, as they read more and more and more, some of them started to think, hey, maybe I'm not as bad at reading as I thought. Maybe I'm actually better than I thought, all right? They were understanding the stories. They were, some of these kids were rereading these stories multiple times. But in general, having that label removed, they were just having a really good time reading and enjoying the story. Now, the second thing that some of these kids said was that the app, they believed, helped them improve as readers. Now, they're not saying that, hey, these stories were really easy for me to read, because that's not true, okay? Several of the kids that I talked to discussed how they had a hard time here and there comprehending the text when they first started. But they really liked the text. They found them engaging, and so they stuck with it and they kept reading. And then over time, they noticed that things were not as difficult as they used to be, and they really found that their comprehension was improving. And so this led to them redefining themselves as readers. So rather than think of themselves in a negative manner, they really started to develop a more positive self-identity as it related to reading. And here's the thing. No one thought that their experiences with the app allowed them to become a good reader. No one that I talked with said, I was a really bad reader, but because of Delight Games, I'm a good reader. But what they did say was that by reading the app, using that app, reading those stories, it showed them they could improve, they could get better, all right? And that with time and persistence, they could likely become a good reader. So this app sort of opened up, broke through a wall, right? And showed them a path from which they could get better and become a good reader. And that was really exciting to them. Now, here's something interesting that I learned. One of the things that came up was that, I thought, my assumption was that, okay, if these kids are having such a great time reading Delight Games, and they're having all these positive experiences, and they're seeing that they can improve, they're probably reading other things. It could be a magazine, right? It could be another app that was similar to Delight Games. It could be a book. I mean, it could be anything, right? I was prepared for it to be any and everything. But I thought they would at least try reading, and they would probably, some other things. And I thought they would probably at least try reading some things that were the same genre as Delight Games. So Delight Games is a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. And I thought they're probably at the very least out reading some different fantasy and sci-fi stuff. But the interesting thing is no one did this, okay? All of the adolescents that I spoke with said they were uninterested in trying to read texts that were not Delight Games. And some hadn't even thought about it until I asked, right? It had the idea of reading something else, hadn't even been on their radar. But for others, they had thought about it and they had made this intentional decision that they were not interested in reading other things besides Delight Games. Those students, they just didn't see the point, okay? Because from their perspective, Delight Games, that was the first text in a long time that they could access, they could comprehend, they could enjoy, and they had such a positive experience with them that they only wanted to read Delight Games text, right? They didn't want to take a chance on another text, even the same genre, okay? Because they knew they would enjoy Delight Games, they knew it was going to work for them, so they were sticking with what they knew worked, okay? They agreed it could be possible to have a good time and the same kinds of experiences with other texts, but they were just really super happy with the Delight Games text and just wanted to keep things the way that it was. All right, so what does this mean in terms of instruction? So the first thing is, I think this means that we can find ways to engage all of our readers, even those who struggle. So Delight Games text, and I think Delight Games is a fantastic app, but those stories, just like any story, right? They're not going to appeal to everyone. No text does. But it could be a great way to help your struggling readers gain positive experiences with reading, right? So it doesn't matter if it happens on their own at home, right? It doesn't have to happen in school, but what matters is that they start to see themselves as readers and start to create a reading practice. So I'm not suggesting that you incorporate Delight Games into your classroom instruction, right? That's not necessarily going to be something that you're able to do or something that's appropriate to do. But what I'm hoping is that you see how some things might be shifted based on what students like about Delight Games. So students don't like having labels placed on them. If we can shift out of that and start to provide positive reading experiences, then we might be able to create a space where struggling readers feel they can take risks and participate. And this is really critical because if they don't enjoy reading, right? If they don't see themselves as readers, if they don't feel like they can't take risks, then they're not going to read and they're not going to apply instruction and they're not going to improve, all right? Now, that all being said, I think it's worth considering how video games, specifically, I'll get the word, specifically ones that support reading development, and this one does, can be used in your classroom or recommended, right? So, recommended so that kids can go home and have an experience reading on their own in their own time that is positive. And in next week's video, I'm going to make some specific recommendations of games that you can consider to use that can help your struggling readers and all your students.